Reader Preface. I have noticed there is not a reading of certain public domain translations of Xenophon. To remedy this, although my voice is not ideal for recitation, and in hopes one better suited is inspired to reread these works for better listening pleasure, I am undertaking to read these for benefit of the public. This is a reading of the Apology by Xenophon. Translation by H. G. Dawkins. Text available in the public domain via Project Gutenberg. Reading by YouTube user Socrates of Athena. The Apology of Socrates by Xenophon. Among the reminiscences of Socrates, none, as it seems to me, is more deserving of record than the counsel he took with himself after being cited to appear before the court, not only with regard to his defense, but also as to the ending of his life. Others have written on this theme, and all without exception have touched upon the lofty style of the philosopher, which may be taken as proof that the language used by Socrates was really of that type. But none of these writers has brought out clearly the fact that Socrates had come to regard death as for himself preferable to life, and consequently there is just a suspicion of foolhardiness in the arrogancy of his address. We have, however, from the lips of one of his intimate acquaintances, Hermogenes, the son of Hipponicus, an account of him which shows the high demeanor in question to have been altogether in keeping with the master's rational purpose. Hermogenes says that, seeing Socrates discoursing on every topic other than that of his impending trial, he roundly put it to him whether he ought not to be debating the line of his defense, to which Socrates in the first instance answered, "What? Do I not seem to you to have spent my whole life in meditating my defense?" And when Hermogenes asked him how, he added, "By a lifelong persistence in doing nothing wrong, and that I take it to be the finest practice for his defense which a man could devise." Presently reverting to the topic, Hermogenes demanded, "Do you not see, Socrates, how often Athenian juries are constrained by arguments to put quite innocent people to death, and not less often to acquit the guilty, either through some touch of pity excited by the pleadings, or that the defendant had skill to turn some charming phrase?" Thus appealed to, Socrates replied, "Nay, solemnly I tell you, twice already I have essayed to consider my defense, and twice the divinity hinders me." And to the remark of Hermogenes, "That is strange," he answered again, "Strange, do you call it, that to God it should seem better for me to die at once? Do you not know that up to this moment I will not concede to any man to have lived a better life than I have? Since what can exceed the pleasure which has been mine, of knowing that my whole life has been spent holily and justly?" And indeed this verdict of self-approval I found re-echoed in the opinion which my friends and intimates have formed concerning me. And now, if my age is still to be prolonged, I know that I cannot escape paying the penalty of old age, in increasing dimness of sight and dullness of hearing. I shall find myself slower to learn new lessons, and apter to forget the lessons I have learnt. And if these be added to the consciousness of failing powers, the sting of self-reproach, what respect have I of any further joy in living? It may be, you know," he added, "that God, out of his great kindness, is intervening on my behalf to suffer me to close my life in the ripeness of age, and by the gentlest of deaths. For if at this time sentence of death be passed upon me, It is plain I shall be allowed to meet an end which, in the opinion of those who have studied the matter, is not only the easiest in itself, but one which will cause the least trouble to one's friends, while engendering the deepest longing for the departed, for of necessity he will only be thought of with great regret and longing who leaves nothing behind unseemly or discomfortable to haunt the imagination of those beside him, but sound of body, and his soul still capable of friendly repose, fades tranquilly away. No doubt, he added, the gods were right in opposing me at that time, touching the inquiry what I was to say in my defense, when you all thought the great thing was to discover some means of acquittal. Since I had effected that, it is clear I should have prepared myself, not that surcease from life which is in store for me anon, but to end my days wasted by disease or by old age, on which a confluent stream of evil things most alien to joyousness converges. No, he added, God knows I shall display no ardent zeal to bring about. On the contrary, if by proclaiming all the blessings which I owe to God and men, if by blazoning forth to the opinion which I entertain with regard to myself, I end by wearying the court, even so will I choose death rather than supplicate in servile sort for leave to live a little longer merely to gain a life impoverished in place of death. It was in this determination, Hermogenes states, that when the prosecution accused him of not recognizing the gods, recognized by the state, but introducing novel divinities and corrupting the young, Socrates stepped forward and said, In the first place, sirs, I am at a loss to imagine on what ground Miletus asserts that I do not recognize the gods which are recognized by the state, since, as far as sacrificing goes, the rest of the world who have chanced to be present have been in the habit of seeing me so engaged at common festivals, and on the public altars, and so might Miletus himself, if he had wished. And as to novel divinities, how, pray, am I supposed to introduce them by stating that I have a voice from God which clearly signifies to me what I ought to do? Why, what else do those who make use of the cries of birds or utterances of men draw their conclusions from, if not from voices? Who will deny that the thunder has a voice, and is a very mighty omen, and the priestess on her tripod at Pytho, does not she also proclaim by voice the messages from God? The god, at any rate, has foreknowledge, and premonitions those whom he will of what is about to be. That is a thing which all the world believes and asserts even as I do. Only, when they describe these premonitions under the name of birds and utterances, tokens, and soothsayers, I speak of a divinity, and in using that designation, I claim to speak at once more exactly and more reverentially than they who ascribe the power of gods to birds. And that I am not lying against the Godhead, I have this as proof. Although I have reported to numbers of friends the counsels of heaven, I have never at any time been shown to be a deceiver or deceived. As they listened to these words, the judges murmured their dissent, some disbelieving what was said, and others out of simple envy that Socrates should actually receive from heaven more than they themselves. Whereupon Socrates returned to the charge. Come, he said, lend me your ears while I tell you something more, so that those of you who choose may go to a still greater length in refusing to believe that I am thus highly honored by the divine powers. Chaerephon once, in the presence of many witnesses, put a question at Delphi concerning me, and Apollo answered that there was no human being more liberal, more upright, or more temperate than myself. And when once more on hearing these words the judges gave vent, as was only natural, to a fiercer murmur of dissent, Socrates once again spoke. Yet, sirs, they were still greater words which the gods spake in oracle concerning Lycurgus, the great lawgiver of Lacedaemon, than those concerning me. It is said that as he entered the temple, the god addressed him with the words, "I am considering whether to call thee god or man." Me he likened not indeed to a god, but in excellence preferred me far beyond other men. Still, I would not have you accept this even on the faith of the god too rashly. Rather, I would have you investigate, point by point, what the god has said. I ask you, is there anyone else you know of less enslaved than myself to the appetites of the body? Can you name another man of more independent spirit than myself, seeing that I accept from no one either gifts or pay? Whom have you any right to believe to be more just than one so suited with what he has, that the things of others excite no craving in him? Whom would one reasonably deem wise, rather than such a one as myself, who, from the moment I began to understand things spoken, have never omitted to inquire into and learn every good thing in my power, and that I labored not in vain? What more conclusive evidence than the fact that so many of my fellow citizens who virtue their pursuit, and many strangers also, choose my society in preference to that of others? And how are we to explain the fact that though all know well enough that I am wholly unable to repay them in money, so many are eager to present me with some gift? And what do you make of this? While no one dreams of dunning me for benefits conferred, hosts of people acknowledge debts of gratitude to myself. And what of this, that during the siege, while others were pitying themselves, I lived in no greater straits than when the city was at height of her prosperity? And of this, that while others provide themselves with delicacies of the market at great cost, mine are the dainties of the soul more sweet than theirs, procured without expense? If in all I have said about myself no one can convict me of lying, is it not obvious that the praise I get from gods and men is justly earned? And yet, in spite of it all, Meletus, you will have it that by such habits I corrupt the young. We know, I fancy, that such corrupting influences are, and perhaps you will tell us if you know of any who, under my influence, has been changed from a religious into an irreligious man, who, from being sober-minded, has become prodigal, from being a moderate drinker, has become a wine-bibber and a drunkard, from being a lover of healthy honest toil, has become effeminate, or under the thrall of some other wicked pleasure. Nay, bless my soul, exclaimed Meletus, I know those whom you persuaded to obey yourself rather than the fathers who begat them. I admit it, Socrates replied, in the case of education, for they know that I have made the matter a study. And with regard to health, a man prefers to obey his doctor rather than his parents. In the public assembly, the citizens of Athens, I presume, obey those whose arguments exhibit the soundest wisdom, rather than their own relations. And it is not the case that, in your choice of generals, you set your fathers and brothers, and, bless me, your own selves aside, by comparison with those whom you believe to be the wisest authorities on military matters. No doubt, Socrates, replied Meletus, because it is expedient and customary to do so. Well then, rejoined Socrates, does it not strike even you, Meletus, as wonderful when in all ordinary concerns the best people should obtain, I do not say only an equal share, but be an exclusive preference, but in my case simply because I am selected by certain people as an adept in respect to the greatest treasure men possess, education? I am on that account to be persecuted by you, sir, on the capital charge. Much more than this, it stands to reason, was urged, whether by himself or by friends who advocated his cause. But my object has not been to mention everything that arose out of the suit. It suffices me to have shown, on the one hand, that Socrates, beyond everything, desired not to display impiety to heaven, and injustice to men, and on the other, that escape from death was not a thing, in his opinion, to be clamoured for importunately. On the contrary, he believed that the time was already come for him to die. That such was the conclusion to which he had come was made still more evident later, when the case had been decided against him. In the first place, when called upon to suggest a counter-penalty, he would neither do so himself nor suffer his friends to do so for him, but went so far as to say that to propose a counter-penalty was like a confession of guilt. And afterwards, when his companions wished to steal him out of prison, he would not follow their lead, but would seem to have treated the idea as a jest, by asking whether they happened to know of some place outside Attica where death was forbidden to set foot. When the trial drew to an end, we are told, the master said, "Sirs, those who instructed the witnesses that they ought to perjure themselves and bear false witness against me, alike with those who listened to their instruction, must be conscious to themselves of a deep impiety and injustice. But for myself, what reason have I at the present time to hold my head less high than I did before sentence was passed against me? If I have not been convicted of having done any of those things whereof my accusers accused me, it has not been proved against me that I have sacrificed to novel divinities in place of Zeus and Hera and the gods who formed their company. I have not taken oath by any other gods, nor named their name. And then the young. How could I corrupt them by habituating them to manliness and frugality? Since not even my accusers themselves allege against me that I have committed any of these deeds, of which death is the penalty, such as robbery of temples, breaking into houses, selling freemen into slavery, or betrayal of the state, so that I must still ask myself in wonderment how it has been proved to you that I have done a deed worthy of death. Nor yet again, because I die innocently, is that a reason why I should lower my crest, for that is a blot not upon me, but upon those who condemn me. For me, I find a certain consolation in the case of Palamedes, whose end was not unlike my own, who still even today furnishes a far noble theme of song than Odysseus, who unjustly slew him. And I know that testimony will be borne to me also by time future and time past, that I never wronged another in any time, or ever made a worse man of him, but ever tried to benefit those who practiced discussion with me, teaching them gratuitously every good thing in my power. Having so said, he turned and went in a manner quite in conformity with the words which he had spoken. So bright an air was discernible alike in the glance of his eye, his gesture, and his step. And when he perceived those who followed by his side in tears, "What is this?" he asked. "Why do you weep now? Do you not know that for many a long day, ever since I was born, sentence of death was passed upon me by nature? If so be I perish prematurely, while the tide of life's blessings flow free and fast, certainly I and my well-wishers should feel pained. But if it be that I am bringing my life to a close on the eve of troubles, for my part, I think you ought all of you to take heart of grace and rejoice in my good fortune." Now there was a certain Apollodorus, who was an enthusiastic lover of the master, but for the rest a simple-minded man. He exclaimed very innocently, "But the hardest thing of all to bear, Socrates, is to see you put to death unjustly." Whereupon Socrates, it is said, gently stroked the young man's head. "But you have been better pleased, my dear one, to see me put to death for some reason other than unjustly." And as he spoke, he smiled tenderly. It is also said that, seeing Anytus pass by, Socrates remarked, "How proudly the great man steps! He thinks, no doubt, he has performed some great and noble deed in putting me to death, and all because, seeing him deemed worthy of the highest honors of the state, I told him it ill became him to bring up his so in a tan-yard. What a scamp the fellow is! He appears not to know that of us two, whichever has achieved what is best and noblest for all future time, is the real victor in this suit. Well, well, he added, Homer has ascribed to some at the point of death a power of forecasting things to be, and I too am minded to utter a prophecy. Once for a brief space I associated with the son of Anytus, and he seemed to me not lacking in strength of soul. And what I say is, he will not adhere long to the slavish employment which his father has prepared for him, but in absence of any earnest friend and guardian, he is like to be led into some base passion and go to great lengths in depravity. The prophecy proved true. The young man fell victim to the pleasures of wine. Night and day he never ceased drinking, and at last became a mere good-for-nothing, worthless alike to his city, his friends, and himself. As to Anytus, even though the grave has closed upon him, his evil reputation still survives him, due alike to his son's base bringing up and his own want of human feeling. Socrates did, it is true, by his self-laudation draw down upon him the jealousy of the court, and caused his judges all the more to record their votes against him. Yet even so I look upon the lot of destiny which he obtained as providential, chancing as he did upon the easiest amidst the many shapes of death, and escaping as he did the one grievous portion of existence. And what a glorious chance, moreover, he had to display the full strength of his soul, for when once he had decided that death was better for him than life, just as in the old days he had never harshly opposed himself to the good things of life morosely, so even in the face of death he showed no touch of weakness, but with gaiety welcomed death's embrace, and discharged life's debt. For myself, indeed, as I lay mind to the wisdom of the man and his nobility, I can neither forget him nor, remembering him, forbear to praise him. But if any of those who make virtue their pursuit have ever met a more helpful friend than Socrates, I tender such an one my congratulations as the most enviable man. End of the Apology by Xenophon.
Since I saw your face, and I'm wondering why you left me out here. I know that you needed me to change, but it's not enough to say you're sorry now. It's been a long time since I walked these dirt roads. It all looks the same, all is different. Who I've been, it's up to them to let go. It's not enough to say I'm sorry now. I'm sitting on the moon, watching the world spin away. Everything's different, there's nothing I can change. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go. This lifeless rock, not a soul to understand. Nothing you can do, not a single reprimand. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go. This monster, swear it's the truth. I just lost control, all I can do is be a better man. Hope in the end it's enough to pay my toll. I'm sitting on the moon, watching the world spin away. Everything's different, there's nothing I can change. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go. This lifeless rock, not a soul to understand. Nothing you can do, not a single reprimand. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go. The hardest part part is coming back. With this history held above my head, the hardest part is coming back. With this history held above my head, sister, I swear that part of me was buried alive, locked low-key. And I pinky pie swear I'm no longer that man. Watching the world spin away. Everything's different, there's nothing I can change. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go. This life is rock, not a soul to understand. Nothing you can do, not a single reprimand. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go. I'm sitting on the moon, watching the world spin away. Everything's different, there's nothing I can change. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go. This life is rock, not a soul to understand. Nothing you can do, not a single reprimand. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go. It's up to you, it's up to me to let it go.
Journal entry of sorts. I'm not quite sure who the audience is for this one, but I do know that it needs to be an authentic movement piece. And that there's something happening for me that has to do with coming on 7 years now, post-doctoring, and finding new skills and new ways of relating, and trying to make these videos work, and trying to share ideas, and feeling like it's about developing heart connections with an entire tribe, and managing my own rage and frustration as I am misunderstood. So the misunderstood parts would be seeking help, processing some bad things I did as a doctor. I was a family doctor. I circumcised baby boys. I circumcised little boys. I took 3 to 5 inches off of the skin of their penises on a routine basis, and although I was doing it for the right reasons, I was desperately trying to do this in a minimal way so that more and more people would not circumcise their little boys. And I evolved a whole program of trying to show the medical profession that this hurt the babies and that they should be anesthetized, at least locally. And then developing the skill to anesthetize my own patients and do a dorsal penile nerve block on these little babies. I was able to have them sleep through the procedure, but I knew that for the next week, every time they woke up and startled over that urine going over that delicate mucous membrane over the tip of the glands of their penis, they would be desensitizing. I knew what I was doing, and I could not stop the procedure. I could only make it less painful. Oh. And I had great hope that I would be able to continue processing this in the company of another doctor who had done similar acts of surgical horror. But I found to my amazement that my language is too harsh and my way of presenting is too dramatic. And I'm going to take the risk of using the word hysterical. And I'm going to look up the word anathema, because I said that this particular doctor's chosen profession, that of complete cosmetic surgery, was an anathema to me, and was asked if perhaps I had chosen too harsh a word. And I don't think I have for the summer of peace. I think if we're really going to do work on learning to be peaceful with ourselves and with one another, we have to claim the shadow work. And this piece of what I did surgically is a part of my shadow work. And yes, it may sound raw as if it just happened yesterday, because there's a part of me that keeps my heart connected and open to those babies that are now 15, 16, 17, 20, 25 years old that I want to apologize to for taking away a part of their sexuality for the sake of medicine or hygiene. And that was wrong. And I wish I had a community to process it with, but for now, it's a camera.
Good morning. The purpose of this video blog is an official apology to Dr. Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary biologist. Recently I appeared on the Bill O'Reilly show, and I unfairly and mean-spiritedly represented Dr. Richard Dawkins. Dr. Dawkins has been critical of my work for the last several years, and unfortunately I reacted by being personally offended and was unfair in my criticism of him in both my television appearances and in my written criticism of him. We represent two different worldviews. Dr. Dawkins represents the worldview of evidence-based science, evolution. I represent the worldview that consciousness is a fundamental reality and facts and evidence are more descriptions of modes of human perception and knowing than descriptions of reality. But the purpose of this blog is not to defend my worldview, but to apologize for my behavior. I'm 65 years old, and I need at this time to learn to listen to my worst critics without being personally offended. So once again, Dr. Dawkins, I understand totally where you're coming from and also how you feel about dogmatic religion and how dogmatic fundamentalism in religion can hurt and damage mankind and humanity and its future evolution. I also want to let you know that I'm more aligned with your thinking than with Bill O'Reilly's, although we have fundamental differences. But once again, the purpose of this is not to defend my worldview, but to apologize for the way I've reacted and for my behavior. I hope that Dr. Dawkins and his colleagues will accept my apology, and I do want to tell you that I am open now, once again, to criticism in any way or form, and I will not take it personally. I think it only helps enlarge the conversation and helps us all to think differently. Thank you for listening to me, which I hope you will, and I don't expect a response or anticipate a response, just want to make peace with myself. Thank you once again.